behaviour of the Japanese army and their police force in particular towards Allied prisoners and civilian internees was really so shocking that it's difficult today to understand how such a cultured people as the Japanese are could be so guilty of such heinous crimes against humanity.
The sky was just blazing with red light of the imagine ammunition dumps and petrol dumps going up. I was 7 years old when I was taken into the internment camp by the Japanese. I do remember arriving there, and they said it would only take a couple of days to register us all. And we didn't realize at that time that it was 3 years later that we were eventually liberated.
I remember the story of when they first went into the camp. Men and women and children were separated. And for 6 months, my grandmother didn't know whether my grandfather was in the same camp, alive, dead, whatever. That must be unbelievable to not know, to just simply not know.
Why did the Japanese take civilian prisoners?
Because they hated white people.
I don't remember anything like that, but
I do remember having said that, not dining room table, but we were never allowed to buy anything Japanese.
No, Japanese was just not.
And even now, I wouldn't even buy a Japanese car. It's out of respect for my parents.
I think any situation that people are in becomes normal, in that everyday life becomes a habit. My mother, she said that children were like colts, and if the mare is frightened, she transmits that to the colt, and I think there's a lot in that. And she made me a little Raggedy Ann doll, and my father made a little camp chair, deck chair for her to sit in, and that's what the internees made to be able to sit out and relax. They made their own sort of deck furniture. And she also had a tiny little bucket that my father made with her name on it, which was her food bucket for the 2 meals that we had each day. It was a friend whose father was very adept at making chocolate fudge. And to this day, I don't know how he got the sugar or the chocolate, but it tasted good, whatever it was. No, we did have fun. And another activity that we enjoyed was we would catch fireflies and put them in a jar and then take them into our beds with the mosquito nets around us and then just let them fly around. And it was like having magic little fairies flying around, lighting up. But there were all sorts of little things like that that made life interesting.
And that she used to make everything for us as well.
Yes. But
I suppose,
well, a lot of people did, but she really did. I mean, she's always been incredibly creative and therefore...
But her love of making
Yes,
things, and I think that was probably because her parents had to make things if they wanted to give her something, especially during that period of when she was in the Philippines. And the love was in the fact
Lavished
that
in the making.
Yes.
Yeah. Which she still does to
Yes.
this day.
and does,
Yeah.
yes, even with her grandchildren.
Over the time that passed, as we had less in the way of food coming in from the outside, the internees started to suffer with all sorts of different ailments. Beriberi was the first affliction. It's very weakening, but by the same time it starts to bloat the legs, and as that bloating starts coming up towards the body, it would eventually cause death. My mother decided to give me blood, and she had her blood put into me just to strengthen me that little bit more. There were some escapees, but they were caught, and they were ordered to dig their own graves and were shot into it. And there were other occasions when people were tortured with the horrible water torture of hosepipe down their throat, that sort of thing.
Who
They were
was
vicious,
MacArthur?
horrid people. MacArthur was General MacArthur, who was in charge of the Philippine army, and he was ordered by the United States to evacuate Manila. He promised when he left that he would return. Ernest Stanley was a Japanese speaker. He became the interpreter between the commandant and his staff and the internees. And nobody liked him because he literally lived with them, was constantly with them. And it wasn't until after we were liberated that it transpired that he was looking after the interests of the internees all along. And he, in fact, discovered that the Japanese had decided that they would take the women and children as hostages and annihilate all the men. And that would be their last stand in Santo Tomas. And with that particular knowledge, Stanley was able to transmit this date of the 7th of February, that this was all going to happen. And those people got word to MacArthur, and so MacArthur decided and instructed two particular groups of his army to make a race between the two for them to get into Santo Tomas. In the camp, we knew something was happening because there were all sorts of gunshots, and the sky, as it was in those days 3 years previously, the whole of Manila seemed to be lit up by fire. So we were at a state that we didn't know what was going to happen. And suddenly a tank came through the front gate, and they stopped, and as they came round with the light of the actual firing and ammunition dumps going up, we saw the silhouette of this enormous tank and the huge men standing on top of it, peeping out of the top, and we knew they couldn't be Japanese. All the internees went absolutely wild. other. In the morning, the American troops had set up their kitchens. They had breakfast. A lot of the internees became ill that day because they ate so much. And so we owe Stanley